Have you ever watched something on a screen that made you question whether you should keep watching, or whether some things are better left unseen? I used to work as a night archivist at the Blackwood Public Library, a 140-year-old building in downtown that smelled of leather bindings and slowly decomposing paper. The job was simple: catalog returned materials, organize the archives in the basement, and monitor the security system. 12 cameras covered every floor. Nothing ever happened until I started actually watching the footage. It was a Tuesday in October when I first noticed something wrong. I was reviewing the previous night's recordings, something I rarely did thoroughly. The library had been empty for hours. Camera 7, positioned in the history section on the second floor, showed the usual static rows of shelves bathed in emergency lighting. Then at 2:17 in the morning, a shadow moved between the stacks. Not a person, a shadow, dense and dark, darker than the surrounding darkness, if that makes sense. It slid along the floor, up the side of a bookshelf, and disappeared around the corner. The whole thing lasted maybe 4 seconds. I rewound it 6 times. Each viewing made my stomach tighten a little more. I told myself it was a technical glitch, compression artifacts, something with the camera sensor. But that night, watching the live feeds, I saw it again. Camera 3, this time in the children's section. The shadow emerged from behind the puppet theater we used for story time, stretched across the carpet like spilled ink, and vanished into the wall. I started keeping a log. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented 17 separate incidents. The shadows appeared on different cameras, different floors, always between 2 and 4 in the morning. They moved with purpose, gliding through the library like they were searching for something. Sometimes they lingered near certain shelves. Sometimes they seemed to pass through solid objects. And they were always alone, never more than one at a time. The patterns started to emerge. Camera 7, the history section, showed activity almost every night. Camera 9, covering the rare books room in the basement, was the second most frequent. I began to notice something else too. The shadows always appeared near specific sections. European history from 1500 to 1700, ancient religious texts, occult studies, collections that dealt with death, plague, and forgotten rituals. I made the mistake of mentioning it to my supervisor, Margaret. She'd worked at Blackwood for 30 years. When I showed her the footage, her face went pale. She watched in silence, then closed the laptop. She told me the cameras had always had issues, She told me not to worry about it. She told me, very specifically, not to go looking through the old incident reports stored in the basement archives. Which, of course, meant I had to. I found them 3 nights later, filed in an unmarked box behind the 1970s census records. Incident reports dating back to 1962, when the library first installed a security system. Guard after guard, archivist after archivist, all describing the same thing. Shadows moving through the building at night. Shapes that shouldn't exist. Darkness that seemed alive. But there was more. Several reports mentioned employees who became obsessed with the footage, who started staying later and later, watching the feeds, trying to understand what the shadows wanted. 3 people over the decades had quit suddenly, refusing to explain why. 1 guard in 1984 had been found unconscious in the rare books room at 3 in the morning. He claimed he'd gone down to investigate movement he'd seen on the cameras. He couldn't remember what happened after he entered the room. He never came back to work. I should have stopped. I should have quit like the others. But something kept pulling me back to those feeds. I started arriving earlier for my shifts. I began watching the live cameras obsessively, waiting for the shadows to appear. When they did, I felt something strange. Not fear, recognition. Like seeing something familiar you'd forgotten long ago. Then, I noticed something new in the footage. The shadows were changing, growing more defined, more substantial. I could almost make out shapes within them, suggestions of human forms, reaching hands, faces pressed against an invisible barrier. And they were appearing more frequently, not just at night anymore. I caught glimpses on the afternoon feeds, brief flickers in the background, while patrons browsed the shelves, completely unaware. Last week, I stayed in the library after closing. I told Margaret I had cataloging to finish. What I really wanted was to see them in person, not through a camera. I needed to know if they were real. I sat in my office on the first floor, watching the monitors as midnight passed. 1 in the morning. 2. At 2:23, camera 7 flickered. The shadow appeared in the history section, larger than I'd ever seen it. It moved slowly down the aisle, past World War II, past the American Revolution, stopping at the medieval European history shelf. I left my office. I climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. The building was silent, except for the settling of old wood and the hum of the heating system. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. I didn't listen. I walked through the darkened stacks toward the history section. The emergency lights cast everything in a sickly green glow. My footsteps echoed too loudly. When I turned the corner into the aisle, it was there. The shadow stood at the far end, near the shelf I'd seen on the monitor, but standing in front of it, I could see details the cameras never captured. It wasn't empty darkness. There was something inside it. Layers of movement, writhing, reaching. Dozens of forms pressed together, overlapping, trying to push through from somewhere else. It noticed me. I don't know how I knew, but I did. The shadow shifted, oriented toward me, and then it moved. Not away, toward me, fast. I ran. Back through the stacks, down the stairs, into my office. I grabbed my keys and phone and got out of that building. I sat in my car in the parking lot, shaking until sunrise. I haven't been back inside. I called in sick for a week. Margaret left me a voicemail saying she understood, that she'd explain everything if I came in to talk. But I'm not going back. I can't. Because last night, sitting in my apartment, I saw something in the corner of my bedroom. Just for a second. A patch of darkness that didn't belong. Darker than it should be. Moving. I checked my phone this morning. There was a photo in my gallery I didn't take. A screenshot from one of the library's security cameras. It shows my office, empty, except for a shadow standing in the doorway. And in that shadow, if you look closely, you can see faces, dozens of them, all watching the camera, all waiting. I think they followed me home. I think they've been waiting a long time for someone to finally see them, really see them. And now that I have, I don't think they're going to let me forget. The question isn't whether they're real anymore. The question is what they want, and why, when I close my eyes, I can still see them, clearer than ever. Almost like they're not outside me anymore, almost like they're inside, looking out through my eyes at a world they can finally touch again.